Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, NBA reporter for Buha's Block, and welcome to another live show. It's been a minute since we've done one of these. I've been battling a nasty cold over the last couple of weeks. I actually filmed a couple of episodes this week and decided to scrap them after hitting a wall at like the 45-minute mark. Just could not get through an episode without losing my voice. But I'm back today on schedule day. One of the best days of certainly the summer, but one of the best days of the year. I get to plan the next 6 to 8 months, depending on how long things go for the Lakers, and already starting to think about what games I'm going to be attending on the road and just looking at all the back-to-backs and the breakdown of everything. So a lot to get into with today's show. I'm going to be breaking down the schedule quickly and then getting into a Q&A portion. Shout out to the late night gang. Just got back from Spectrum, where I did show Spectrum Sportsnet breaking down the schedule, storylines, and the top 5 players in the West, and also did a podcast on the Lake Show podcast for Spectrum. So I think that'll be out either later today or tomorrow. And then Spectrum Sportsnet will be dropping tonight actually right now as we speak. So you could consume me in 2 platforms if you want to watch on YouTube live and then also watch it on Spectrum. But shout out to everybody. So let's get into the schedule. The Lakers released their schedule today, and I'm going to pull it up right here. I think it's clear that this is a backloaded schedule in terms of, similar to, I think last season, although last season the start was a bit crazier for LA. I think this is their best start to a season I can't remember when. Like they typically have a brutal start to the season. So I think this is actually a stretch where they could go, like, I tentatively would say 7-3, but I could easily see 8-2 or 9-1. I'll make it a little bit bigger here for those watching on YouTube. So looking at the schedule, like, I think I have 10 key dates here that stand out. So first one is opening night against Golden State. That is, of course, the season opener. It is also Steph versus LeBron round, like, 30 something. I don't even know at this point how many times they've played, but obviously anytime it's Lakers, Warriors, LA versus San Francisco, NorCal versus SoCal, like that's always a big matchup. And Lakers and Warriors have had several classic regular season games, to say nothing of the 2023 playoff series. 10-29 at Minnesota. That is the first time LA goes back to Minnesota for a road rematch of their first round series from last season. It's technically the second time they play, because they play Minnesota second game of the season in LA, but obviously they had a couple of tough losses in Minnesota. So I think that will be a big barometer game for them, just to kind of get over the last year's playoff failures. Then 11-12 at OKC. I think that is a huge test for them. Comes during the middle of a 5-game road trip, their first long road trip of the season. And I think that's just a kind of going back to last season with the 2 games that they had in OKC. I think those are going to be some big games for them this year, of course, to just kind of see where they measure up against the best team in the West. Then 11-28 versus Dallas. That is the first home game back for AD, assuming that he's able to play in that game. It's also the first Dallas matchup of the season, and it's also the last NBA Cup game for the Lakers during group play. So that'll be a big game in terms of determining whether they are potentially going to the knockout stage or whether they're just going to be eliminated and then have the home and home during that week and a half or so break for the NBA Cup knockout stage, and then semifinals and finals. Next one is 12-25 versus Houston. That is, of course, Christmas Day, which is the marquee matchup of the season. LeBron versus KD. So that's going to be a really big game for LA. And I think at that point, they'll be 25, 30 games into the season. So we'll have a better sense of where they're at and where they stack up in the West. Then we got January 20th at Denver. This kicks off an 8-game road trip for the Grammy trip. As brutal of a Grammy trip as I can remember. Technically, one of the games is in LA against the Clippers, but it's at Denver, then back to LA, against the Clippers, then back out to Dallas. So as someone who has flown from LA to those cities and back, like that is still going to be a tough trip. And I really view that Clippers game as a road game, just in the pure sense of like how much travel they're going to be doing. Of course, it's LA and they'll be able to sleep in their beds. They don't have to sleep in a hotel, but it also, like, your routine gets disrupted by being in a different arena, different start time, different warm-up time, all that stuff. So that functionally is a road game, and that Denver game is going to be kicking off that trip and really setting the tone for the Grammy trip. Then February 5th versus Philadelphia, first game home from the Grammy trip. It is also kicking off an 8-game homestand for the Lakers, which is their longest homestand of the season. And it is also trade deadline day. So they're going to be coming out of the Grammy trip potentially with a new roster to some extent. In theory, they will likely have made some type of move, even if it's a small move, even if it's a medium move, like something, I think, at that point. So they will likely have a new roster to some extent by February 5th. Then February 22nd versus Boston, Lakers Celtics. Anytime that happens, it's a big deal. But it is more importantly the Pat Riley statue unveiling. So the Lakers are making a statue for Pat Riley, who is, I would say, the second best coach in Lakers history behind Phil Jackson, top 10, if not top 5 coach all time, and obviously presided over the Showtime era and won 5 titles as Lakers head coach. So that's going to be an awesome just trip down memory lane, and just thinking about, I'm sure Magic and Kareem and Cooper and Worthy and all the Lakers greats from the Showtime era will be in attendance to celebrate Pat Riley. Then I cheated a little bit and put a couple games for my 9th key date. I've at Houston on March 16th and 18th. It's a back-to-back series in Houston, not technically back-to-back. There's a day in between, but it kicks off their final big road trip of the season. They got a 6-game trip in the middle to end of March. And that's just going to be a really pivotal part of their season where they'll start to jockey for seeding and playoff positioning. And I wanted to try and balance home games versus road games. So just looking at like that part of the schedule, I think those couple of Houston games are going to be big. Then they play OKC 2 of the final 6 games of the season, but I'm going to pick the second one, which is on April 7th, as the final key game of the season. And that's just another barometer game for them, another measuring stick test where they'll see, I assume OKC will be the 1 seed. They'll probably win 60 plus games again, but this could be a preview of the Lakers' second round or conference finals matchup, depending on where they're at in the standings and how the bracket shakes out. So those are my 10 key dates for the season. I think there's a lot of fun games on the schedule. Lakers, to get into the actual schedule here in terms of the breakdown, I tweeted this out on X earlier. Breakdown of the schedule, they have 14 back-to-backs, which is tied for 13th most in the league. So the most this season is 16, second most is 15. Lakers are tied with several teams for 14. They have 34 nationally televised games, which is tied for the most. I believe it's with, I think it's OKC, New York, and Golden State, if I'm not mistaken. I think those are the 3 teams tied with the Lakers for most nationally televised games. In terms of road trips, they have 1 8-game road trip, 1 6-game road trip, 1 6-game road trip split in half. And this one's pretty wild because going into the NBA Cup knockout stage, they have a 3-game road trip. Then, depending on if they make the knockout stage, if they're a wild card team, they could potentially be on the road, or even if they're just a lower seeded group winner, there's a path here to them potentially having 3 road games, playing a road knockout game, winning that, then going to Vegas, playing in the semifinals and finals in Vegas, which is kind of a home game because of how close Vegas is to LA, but functionally 2 road games for LA. Then they come out of the NBA Cup stretch with 3 more road games. So one of them is against the Clippers, but again, similar to the 8-game trip, I consider that as like a road game. If you're traveling somewhere else and coming back to LA, then traveling back out, like I view that as a road stop. So there's actually a possibility the Lakers have a 9-game road trip if things break against them, I guess, in the NBA Cup, where they have to play on the road in the knockout stage and then end up going to Vegas. I don't foresee that happening, but I just have to note that that is a possibility. Then one more 5-game trip. And then in terms of homestands, they have 1 8-game homestand and 2 5-game homestands. I think the toughest stretch for them is late January through late February. There's at Denver, at the Clippers, at Dallas. That's part of the Grammy trip, at Cleveland, at New York. Then they come back for that homestand. Home Philly, Golden State, OKC, San Antonio, Dallas, Clippers, Boston, Orlando. That is just a brutal 16-game stretch for them. That is, I think, one of the tougher months I can remember. And then easiest stretch to me is early November through early December, where they have at Charlotte, at New Orleans, home Utah, at Utah, home New Orleans, home Phoenix, at Toronto. So it's not even like that easy of a stretch, but there really aren't many easy pockets in this schedule. But I think certainly it's more front loaded to be in LA's favor compared to the second half of the season, where especially starting in like January, the schedule ramps up and gets pretty tough. But that's really my quick thoughts on the schedule. So let's get into the Q&A portion here. I'm going to pull this back up. Let's get into the chat here. Rock Official says the rest is more valuable than the cup, in my opinion. I agree. I get the appeal of the cup, and I think it's nice to have something to rally around in the early portion of the season. And I think just having some stakes and playing some playoff atmosphere-esque games is important, and it's nice. But as we saw in 2023 and as we saw with Milwaukee last year, there is this lull that comes after you play in the cup and play high stakes games that early into the season, where it's, you can't really simulate a playoff game, but you get pretty close with the cup games. And then going back to regular season games, you technically play an extra game. And like, I think for a team like the Lakers, who have some injury prone guys in their rotation, like, and a guy in LeBron who's 41, year 23, you want to be careful with his minutes. Like, you probably don't want to be advancing and playing. Like, if it happens, right? And you're going to take as many wins as you can get. But I think if you could decide whether you want to advance or not, I would pick not advance and just play the home and, get the rest of like the week and a half or so and play the one home game, one road game. And, I think that's a better outcome for LA. Kwavi777, will you be still attending road games like last season? Yes, I will. I won't be going to as many. I've been averaging my 5 years on the Lakers beat. First year, I didn't travel just because that was the year post bubble, and we just weren't, like most people weren't traveling at that season. That was the year that there was no fans in the building until the playoffs. So I actually traveled in the playoffs that year. I ended up covering Phoenix after they beat the Lakers. We didn't have a Suns writer. So I actually ended up covering Phoenix through the finals, because that's the year they made the finals and lost to Milwaukee. But outside of that season, I would say on average, I've averaged about 33 to 35 road games per season. Of the 41, and then all playoff road games. So it's not going to be anywhere close to 33, but I think I'll definitely go to Boston, New York. I mean, of course, both Clipper games. I'm going to try to go to at least one, if not both, of the Golden State games. Sacramento's a pretty quick trip and a pretty cheap trip, so I might go up to Sacramento. We'll go to New York, probably both New York games. Maybe Chicago. Like, I want to go to the bigger cities and the bigger matchups for sure. If they end up going into the knockout stage, or if they end up going to the semifinals, finals, I'll definitely be in Vegas for that. But I would guesstimate I end up going to like 10 to 15 road games this year. So one thing I want to do, and I would love to know the interest from you guys, is like, been considering starting a playback. And for the 25 to 35 road games I don't go to, maybe just watching it with you guys and doing a playback, and then going straight into going live after that. But I think that would be something that would be fun and interactive for those who like watching games on playback. Chuck Dangler, aka Fang Charlie, says, Jovan, I visited AR and it was so nice talking to Aaron and Reggie. For the record, those are his two agents. Both of them say, quote, you're their man. Ha ha ha. Yeah, shout out to Aaron and Reggie. I'm sure they are listening right now. and I put in a good word for you, and they were sending me pictures of you talking to Austin, so that was cool. King Goku 209, do you think SGA is better than Jokic right now? No, I do not. I think Jokic is the best player in the world, and I think he's been the best player in the world since 2020. I think the 2021-22 season, I give Giannis the nod for 2020, 2021. But from that following season on, I think Jokic has been the best player in the NBA. And I think arguably just had the best season of his career. I mean, dude basically just averaged a 30-point triple-double as a starting center. And I voted for him for MVP. I think he should have won MVP. Now, I give Shea his props, obviously, for winning MVP and for winning finals MVP. And to me, I would put him at number 2 right now. Like, going into last year, I had Luka and Giannis above Shea. I think after this past season, I got to give him his flowers and put him at number 2. But I still think Jokic is the better player. And maybe I'm biased, but I also think if you surveyed all 30 GMs, at least 25 would pick Jokic over Shea. And like, I don't know anyone that, at least that I talk to, that thinks Shea is better than Jokic. I think he gets his flowers, but like, I still think Jokic is the best player in the league. Young Claire, how many wins do you think LA starts with in the first 15? So I said 7-3, and that's me like being a little conservative, because I think they could easily start 8-2 or 9-1 if they're taking things very seriously. I just know like the Lakers sometimes will trick away games early in the season, and I don't know, that's more like maybe just a vibe thing. But if we go top 15, so let's pull up the schedule again. So first one, so they got Golden State and Minnesota. I do think they're going to split. I wouldn't be surprised if they lose opening night to Golden State, just because the Lakers have, for whatever reason, tended to not play well on opening night. It is a big game. It's obviously the opening night, not just for the Lakers, but for the entire NBA. It's a game, Steph versus LeBron. But I feel like Golden State and LA have also kind of had each other's numbers on the road. Like I almost feel like both teams have played better in each other's buildings than they have at home. But I could see them splitting those first two. I think they'll win at Sacramento. I think they'll win home versus Portland. So I think they're going to start 3-1. I think they're going to lose at Minnesota. I think they're going to win at Memphis. So that's 4-2. I think they're going to win versus Miami. I think they're going to win at Portland. I think they're going to win at San Antonio. So now we're talking 7-2. But then I think they lose Atlanta to start that road trip. I'm really high on Atlanta. I right now have them as like a 4 or 5 seed in the East. So that's where I get to 7-3. I think they beat Charlotte. Probably lose at OKC, beat New Orleans, beat Milwaukee. So it's a 3-2 road trip. So that would get them to 10-4, and then I think they come back and beat Utah. So I think 11-4. That is my prediction for the first 15 games is 11-4. Lego Team Builder says, Jovan, I'm confused. So is every Laker game on 2025-26 on Spectrum, even opening day and Christmas? I don't see where it specifies which days are not on Spectrum. That's a good question that I don't know the answer to off the top of my head. If I had to guess, there's probably some games that are not on Spectrum, but I don't think it's going to be all 34 of the nationally televised games, obviously. But if I get that answer at some point, I will let you know. User says, man, get the hell out of here. Jokic is not the best player in the NBA. Stop repeating what you hear on ESPN. Be an independent thinker. So, I mean, I'm open and honest about my Jokic bias. I mean, 1, I'm half Serbian. 2, he's one of my top 3 favorite players of all time, including LeBron and Shaq. So I'm probably the wrong person to ask about Jokic. But I've had 2 MVP votes. I voted for him both times, and both were the years he didn't win. One was the Embiid year, one was the Shea year. I think the Embiid one aged poorly, and Jokic should have won that one. I think the Shea one's a little closer because obviously he won a championship and Finals MVP, and I think he had an incredible playoffs. And so I would actually disagree here that I'm puppeting or not thinking for myself. Like I think there are some people who have changed their opinion to thinking Shea is better or whatever. Like I still think Jokic is that dude, and I think, I'm very high on Denver this year too. I have them as the second best team in the West, and I said in my West rankings I had them same tier as OKC. Asian Boy 3090. Hey Jovan, which matchup are you looking forward to most? Plus, what is an underrated matchup you're excited for? I think that it's a good question with the. It's tough to say like what I'm looking forward to most. I guess that first at OKC game on the 12th of November to me it's middle of a road trip, so you're going to be a little bit tired. You've already traveled to a couple of cities. You're about a month into the season almost, and I just think that's a really big game, a really big test for LA for where they're at right now. So, or at that time. So I think that's probably a big barometer game for me that I'm looking forward to is at OKC on November 12th. I would say an underrated game. I mean, I mentioned the Philly game on the trade deadline. Like trade deadline games are always weird. I think that's always like a game that you don't know who's going to be available, how many guys are going to be available. I think I'll say this. I don't know if it's going to be an underrated game, but like we know that there's going to be likely some LeBron buzz around the trade deadline, whether someone's like forcing it or whether it's legitimate. I don't know at this point. I can't tell you where things are going to be at 5-6 months from now, but they play at Cleveland on the Grammy trip on January 28th. And I think I would not be surprised. I'm calling it now, so you guys can clip this or come back to it at some point in the future. But I would not be surprised if someone, if there's some report or something around the time about either LeBron potentially wanting to be traded to Cleveland or like wanting to close his career, finish his career in Cleveland and go back next summer or something. Like I think, and I don't know like the legitimacy of that or what, like it might just be a constructed storyline, but I anticipate something happening where something with LeBron in Cleveland kind of happens around that time because it's about a week before the trade deadline. And I would not be surprised if there's some type of manufactured drama. A Music Lava 4L. I heard a podcast episode where a very compelling case was made for SGA being better than Jokic as a scorer because more than SGA, Jokic needs to get the ball in his ideal spots to be most effective. Yeah, it's kind of hard to compare like a point. I mean, Shea I would consider a point guard, and Jokic obviously is like a point center, but technically a center. And we saw how Alex Caruso was able to be disruptive against him in Game 7, and that was as effective as like I think the last time I can remember anyone disrupting him like that was probably I think at times like Karl Anthony Towns in that 2024 series against Minnesota in the second round, but really you probably have to go back to Dwight in the bubble. But I think I know people constantly reference the Dwight thing, but I just think and I'm someone who has studied Jokic, and I think like you see this with all the greats where I think there was kind of a period where Kobe entered a different era of his, or just a different status. I think LeBron, especially kind of going to Miami. I think Steph around like 20. Like I think there's just a time when the greats figure it out and go to a different level. And I just think comparing Jokic in 2023 or 24, 25 to where he was in 2020, like even if the numbers are relatively similar, I just think he was at such a higher level now or like the last few years that I don't like. I think Dwight in 2020 versus Jokic now would be a completely different matchup, but he has defended him arguably the best anyone ever has, and Alex Caruso defended him awesome in that series, and they were just fronting. And I do think OKC gets away with a lot of contact that other teams don't necessarily get, but like it is what it is. If you can get away with it, like why not do it? The difference for me is like I still think at its peak Denver's offense is better than OKC's offense, and I think if Jokic has the ball, I still trust him more than Shea to generate a good high quality look for either himself or his teammates. Where with OKC, I think their defense was awesome throughout the playoffs pretty consistently, but when they would struggle, especially in the Denver and Indiana series, you would just see their offense get in the mud. And I don't think Denver's offense ever quite gets in the mud. Like they might not shoot the ball well, but I think the process and the system of Denver's offense running through Jokic is at a higher level than the same thing running through Shea, even though I would argue Shea has better weapons around him overall than Jokic does. And that's maybe debatable, but like I think J-Dub and Chet are a better 2-3 than Jamal Murray and Aaron Gordon. Or if you want to put like MPJ as like the third, previously as the third guy offensively, like Murray, MPJ. Like I just think Shea's cooking with a little bit more in OKC. And that's where these things also get tough, is it's tough to separate supporting cast versus, but I still think it's Jokic. But if you, again, like you're splitting hairs, I think it's pretty close and could just be more of a 1A, 1B situation. And if you think it's Shea, I'm not going to like strongly disagree with you. J Drake 278, thank you for the super chat. If this LA and King trade rumor real, Reaves for Keon and Keegan, I think it would be a great trade for LA. I don't think Reaves fit with LA is worth $30 million. Yeah, I know this has been going around. I have not heard anything about this. I think based on my understanding of how LA values Austin, I think if they were to trade him, it would have to be a player at least on his level or better, ideally better, but like at least on his level. And I like Keegan Murray, but to suggest Keegan Murray is anywhere close to Austin Reaves, I just don't think is true at all. I like those two pieces for the Lakers. I just don't. I personally think that's selling pretty low on Austin, and I think the Lakers would view that way as well. So like we could debate like the fit, I guess, but I think if you're willing to do if you're the Lakers and you're willing to do this, I think you might as well just put Austin on the trade block, and like I think you will get a better return than Keon and Keegan, to be completely honest. I also don't really get it from Sacramento's perspective. You already don't have a lot of defense, and I think you're downgrading defensively going from Keegan and Keon to Austin, and then you already have Levine, DeRozan, and Sabonis. So now Austin is actually having a downgrade in his role, and like he's more of a playmaker, I guess, or a lead ball handler than those guys. Although you could maybe debate him versus Levine. I think Levine is an underrated playmaker, but even then, it's like I don't like an Austin Reaves, Zach. Like the Lakers were considering at one point potentially trading for Zach LaVine years ago, and like I didn't like the fit of an Austin Reaves, Zach LaVine backcourt then. I think right now, like there'd be a lot of. I don't think it really makes sense for either side, to be completely honest. Now, as far as Austin being worth $30 million, I know $30 million is a lot, and it is objectively a lot. But like if you look at the guys in that, like Emmanuel Quickley is making $32 million. I'm sorry, Austin's a better player than Emmanuel Quickley, and and apples to oranges. There's a lot of context and circumstance that go into contracts, and like not everything is comparable per se. But if you look at a lot of the guys, like Jeremy Grant is making $30 million. I think Tyler Hero and Austin are very close in terms of production and talent and ability. And he's another guy making low to mid 30s. So I just think if you look at the market, like we can debate worth, right? But when you look at the market and you look at Austin's production versus the guys in this similar price point that he is rumored to be in, he's right there with that. Now, you can maybe question whether he's worth that on the Lakers, and I think we need more of a sample size with Luka to really determine that. But I've been on the mindset, I think Austin is going to get paid next summer, and then if it doesn't work this year, you could always trade him next year and going into the trade deadline, and like you'll also be able to get more for him because he'll be locked into a multi-year deal and he'll be able to fetch. Because right now, I just don't. I think with him being an expiring contract and basically making mid-level money, I think any type of trade you're doing is this type of trade, which to me, like, I like Keon Ellis and Keegan Murray individually, but I think those are bench players for most of the top teams in the West. And if you're replacing such a big piece in Austin, I think from a talent perspective, you get worse. And like, I think already the Lakers are kind of at a talent deficit at spots like 4 through 9 in their rotation compared to most of the other West contenders. I think you get deeper, obviously you're trading 1 for 2, but your talent, I think, decreases. Glenn Gold, thank you for the super chat. Yo, Glenn S here. Been a minute, but just wanted to say can't wait for the season with Buha's block, and let us know if you get mistaken for Jake LaRavia now. # late night gang. I appreciate it, Glenn. I can't wait for the season either. And I actually, better late than never. And we're 30 minutes in, and the crowd has grown a bit. So wanted to plug this and let you guys know about it. So we're doing a Buha's Block survey. And I want to hear from you guys because I want to continuously improve the show. I value all of your opinions and perspectives, and that helps inform how I want to shape the show. So as a further thank you for doing the survey, just I appreciate it. You guys taking the time to do it, and it will help me in terms of the direction of the show going into next season. But I will be hosting a private stream as a thank you for everyone who takes the survey. So you just put in your email, and then all the email addresses that take the survey will be getting a notification once we finalize a date. And I'll probably do some polling to figure out the best day and time for as many people as possible. But then we could do a private stream that will not be public on YouTube, and I probably be a little bit more intimate and honest with some things that I maybe can't quite say publicly. So if you can ask whatever questions you want on that, and it will be limited to however many people take the survey. So the link to the survey is in the show notes on YouTube and on audio platforms if you're listening to this later today on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever. So just wanted to make note of that for those who are interested in taking a survey, filling out just some things that you like about the show, some things you'd like to improve. And if you want to yell at me about my Austin takes, go for it. Kendrick Jenkins 9-6, two premier young 3-and-D guys for Austin isn't good value. Where I disagree here is the premier. I don't know that I would like. I mean, yeah, I don't. Again, from a fit perspective, I actually like. I think Keon Ellis would help right now. I think Keegan Murray would help right now. I mean, I don't even want to throw out a number for Austin because I feel like, again, it's always the thing in the chat. I always say this, but like no matter what, whenever I talk about Austin, half of the people are for it, half the people are against it. Like, I think at worst, if you want to be pessimistic on Austin, I think he's a top 60 player. If you want to be optimistic, I think he's top 50, top 45-ish, somewhere in there. And I just don't think Keegan Murray or Keon Ellis is ever going to sniff that range in terms of like rankings. So I think just from a talent perspective, it is a significant downgrade. Because I also think I flip it then. Right now, Austin's their third best player. Who's their third? Like, are we talking, is Rui their third best player now? Is Keegan Murray their third best player? Is it DeAndre Ayton? And then you look at everyone else in the West and their third best and their fourth best guys. And I think there's a giant gap. Like right now, I think Austin is closing the talent gap with the Lakers versus a lot of other teams. Sporadic. I saw a post that Jacob Rude recommended Dylan Brooks for Gabe and Maxey. Doesn't seem likely, but would be nice for Lakers. Yeah, I would assume that Phoenix would want something in addition to just Gabe and Maxey. But if you could swing that is a clear upgrade to me. I'm not the biggest Dylan Brooks fan, but Kendrick Jenkins, I love Austin, don't get me wrong, but that's good value to me for this specific roster. I mean, for the specific roster, it's not bad value. I just think, I don't know. I think Austin has more value than some people think. And not even saying to keep him. I think you can get more for him. Like, I think you could get a better best player than Keegan Murray. That's more so my point. And I like Keegan Murray. I just think he's more of I think he's a fringe starter to like good bench player on a championship level team. Ron Rich 2776. How did Lakers feel about Rui? It's the last year of his contract. Will they extend him before the end of the season? So I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the date, it's like October something. Let me see what like the extension date of if they don't extend him. That they can't. It's not. I'm not seeing it right now, but let me pull up their. When's the deadline? I don't know why it's not showing up on Spot Track. October 1st. Purple Gold Mine says. So October 1st, we'll roll with that. That sounds right to me. So they have until whether it's October 1st or sometime around there, it's late September, early October. We'll go with October 1st. They have until October 1st to extend Rui. So that is something to note. They can't extend him at the end of the season. I do not, with the current intel I have, I do not expect Rui to be extended by the Lakers in the next 6 weeks. Certainly possible that something happens, but I would say most of what's been out there is them wanting to keep the books clean. I think wanting to see whether he starts or whether he's like their sixth man, just kind of how the pieces fit this year. And I think for a lot of guys, like obviously some guys, Marcus Smart, DeAndre Ayton, they have player options, but like I think for the Lakers overall, there's a lot of evaluation with so many guys being in contract years that this is a big year for deciding who are we going to keep, who are we going to trade, who are we going to let walk next summer. Like there's a lot of things that they have to decide on. So I do not expect him to be extended before October 1st. Therefore, I do not expect him to be extended before the end of the season. I think the Lakers are high on Rui. I just think Rui, there's just a positional squeeze right now where I've talked about this when I've talked about the starting lineup, but Rui, LeBron, and Luka, like Rui is now the fifth option. If we just assume let's just keep the same starting lineup. DeAndre Ayton steps in for Jackson Hayes. Rui is now the fifth option. DeAndre Ayton is a better offensive player. He's a better scorer, and he's going to be more involved offensively than Rui is. So now Rui goes from being the fourth guy to the fifth guy, and so that like there at some point there's some diminishing returns of just like, is how you're not really optimizing Rui per se. Like at that point, he's almost exclusively a catch and shoot spot up guy, which because he's such a good shooter still has value, but like Rui can do more offensively. And I think that's mitigated a little bit by there being so many mouths to feed in that starting group. But I think that the bigger issue is the defensive end, where as constructed, if you have Ayton, LeBron, Rui, Austin, Luka, you are now putting Rui on the top wings and you're putting Austin on the top guards. And I think in either direction, that is not ideal. So I think if you start Marcus Smart for Rui, you put Marcus on the top guards or the top wings, and then Austin is the secondary guy, or LeBron is the secondary guy in the front court. And I specifically think I could go for a million reasons why I think Austin should start for Rui. Just he's a better player. He's a more talented player. He's also in a contract year. Lakers want to retain him. So I think they're going to prioritize that, figuring, kind of just the politics of that. But I also think if you start, let's say you move Austin to the bench, start Marcus and keep Rui in there, you still need, like most teams, there's been a shift towards size, and like some teams play unorthodox style positions and stuff, but like most teams have two good guards. That's just the state of the NBA in 2025. And you still need a good or a capable secondary backcourt defender. And for whatever limitations Austin has, I think he's a better defender than a lot of people like to think, especially against guards specifically. I of course, against bigs and big wings, he's going to get bulldozed, and we've seen that. I think the Lakers got to be careful with the switching next season. But against guards, I think he's actually held his own for the most part, even against some pretty good guards. And he's had several key performances against all-star level guys over the last few years that I think people that don't like Austin like to overlook. But if you're putting Austin as the secondary guy, I think that's fine. I think where he runs into some limitations is as the primary guy. But if the alternative is putting Luka on that guy, or putting Rui on that guy, or putting LeBron on that guy, I think that's a mistake. LeBron's 41, year 23. You don't want to tax him like that. Luka is not capable of that. And then Rui, I think, has been able to scale down progressively better as a Laker, but you don't want to put Rui on guards. Rui is best really as like a 3.5/4 defensively, not a guy who's scaling down to guard like twos. So just by process of, regardless of like the talent and the skill and the fit offensively, I think Austin needs to be out there actually for his defense, which I know for some people sounds a little crazy, but I think the discourse about the defense has gone overblown. Like charges, his rotations, his ability to chase guys, screen navigation is all good. And even his isolation defense statistically has been pretty good. It's just if he gets switched on to a Julius Randle and Aaron Gordon, those guys are going to go through his chest and he might get an and one or something. And I think the Lakers, both with Austin and Luka, have to be more strategic with their switching. Kendrick Jenkins, line 6. Who do you see as realistic trade options by the trade deadline for us? I think my understanding of how the Lakers are viewing it is they really want to see just what this group looks like and what the holes in the team are. And like, I can give you I think they could use a better backup center, or at least a more defensive minded center. And I still think they need ideally a better player than Marcus or Rui that ties together that, like, I think a Herb Jones or like a Jalen Suggs would be like the perfect fifth guy for them. And those guys do come with some shooting concerns, but like, I view them as like higher levels of the Marcus Smart player archetype. But that fifth guy, Wiggins is a version of it. He's not quite the perfect fit because I think he slipped a bit defensively, but obviously offensively, he's better than Smart. He's better than Herb. He's better than Suggs. But like some type of upgrade over the Smart Rui fifth guy in the lineup that either potentially sends out Rui or keeps him, but then slides those guys down a little bit in the slotting of the roster. And maybe you could flip Gabe and Maxey plus an asset or two for some type of player that addresses that. That to me would be the most realistic or the best thing for this roster would be if you had Ayton, LeBron, wing player, wing/big guard X, Austin and Luka with Smart and Rui, and maybe a backup center upgrade and like Vando or Gabe as like your top 9. I really like that roster much more than the current roster. So I don't have any specific names for you in terms of realistic trade options because I don't even know if the Lakers, like, I think Wiggins, there'll probably be some circling back on that, but it'll probably, like, there'll be some teams that shake, like maybe New Orleans is underachieves, which I don't think they're going to be in the play-in mix. I think they're going to be pretty bad. Maybe a Trey Murphy or a Herb Jones does become available, and then all of a sudden you have a package that you can offer for them, and like and they're looking for draft capital because they gave up so much to get Derek Queen, and like they're looking to retain some draft capital. And if you could flip something for, especially keeping Austin potentially out of that deal, if you could get a Trey Murphy or Herb Jones as your fifth starter, that's like a home run for the Lakers, in my opinion. So not saying that's going to happen, but like, I think they want to maintain the flexibility to see what does someone get injured or what's the position, like, is everyone underperforming as shooters and all of a sudden you need a shooter, or like there's different ways that the season could go. So I think for now they're in evaluation mode and they're going to be, I think, until at least like mid to late December, and then start to look at the trade market. Jeff, hey Buha, what's your prediction for the Grammy trip plus homestand 10-6? So to go through that quickly, at Denver, at Clippers, at Dallas, at Chicago, at Cleveland, at Washington, at New York, at Brooklyn, and then home, Philly, Golden State, OKC, San Antonio, Dallas, Clippers, Boston, Orlando. I will say, I think they're going to go 4-4 on the Grammy trip. That's a really tough trip. And then I think they will go, I'll say 5-3. I'll say 10-6. I'll go 10-6 overall. But that's I think 10-6, to be completely honest, is a win based on that stretch. Because I mean, at Denver, that's a really tough game. At the Clippers, I think they should win that one. At Dallas, I think they should win. At Chicago, they should win. But at Cleveland's going to be really tough. And again, I think there's going to be a lot of LeBron Cleveland buzz for that one. At Washington is a win. At Brooklyn's a win. But at New York is a really tough one. Like, they've won some of these games last year, so I think you got to give them obviously a shot. But Golden State, OKC, San Antonio, Dallas, Clippers, Orlando, like, I think that's a pretty tough homestand as well. So I'll tentatively say 10-6, but I think that's like a very respectable 10-6. Cali Grown 760. If Brown retires after this year, Rui can slide over to the 4, which is not his natural position. This is a really good point, and I agree with you, and I think that's what makes the Rui situation so interesting. Is like, if you just took LeBron off this roster, obviously they take a major step back. They don't have, I think, a top 10 player and a guy who just finished 6th in MVP, 6th in All NBA second team guy. But for like, from the Rui perspective only, it's better for Rui, and Rui could slide in as a starting 4. And I think that, like, I still think you need to give him the support of in my opinion, the best. I think Rui is, depending on your roster construction, you could start him or bring him off the bench. I think if you're starting him, ideally you have two elite, like good to elite defenders in the front court around him. If it's like DeAndre Ayton and Marcus Smart, I don't think that's quite at the level I would want around Rui to support him. Like, to be honest, like a team I think about a lot with like Rui's fit is like Minnesota. I think if you had a Rudy Gobert and a Jaden McDaniels around Rui, that's like the perfect way to supplement his weaknesses of you have an elite wing defender, you have an elite rim protector, good rebound, really good rebounder in Gobert, like solid, above average to solid rebounder in McDaniels. And I think that would protect a lot of, or OKC with either Chet or Hartenstein, and then J-Dub at the other forward spot. Like that protects Rui's weaknesses in a way that just allows him to focus on, like, I think ideally you want him as your worst front court defender, and you want him as like a mismatch hunting guy who can post up smaller guys because some teams can't match up with the big front court. But also, we've seen the cutting, the catch and shooting, the spot up stuff. Like he can do a lot offensively, but I think it's more about supplementing what he can't do with the right front court pieces. If he's a starter, if he's a bench player, it's a different conversation. But I see the potential path for him elevating and being a starter next season if LeBron moves on and the Lakers go in a different direction. I also think then they need to make some changes to the actual roster, because I don't know if a Smart, Rui, Ayton front court, especially compared to the rest of the West front courts, keeps the Lakers in like that contender mix. No username 1269. Since Jovan doesn't work for The Athletic, will he still get access to locker room interviews and travel for away games or no? Yes, I still will have a credential for next season. I'll still be, I won't be in the beat writer row, but I'll probably be a row or two back in terms of where I'll be sitting at home games. I'll still have locker room access. And I won't be, I mentioned this earlier, I won't be going to like, typically would go to like 33 or 35 of the 41 regular season road games and then all the playoff road games. This year, I'll probably travel to more like 10 to 15 regular season road games, and then hopefully all the playoff road games. But yeah, so, but nothing changes in terms of my access. Let's see, I don't like that YouTube changed everyone's usernames back to their actual username and not their names in here, because I recognize people's profile pictures, but obviously it's different names. But Rich says, is Rui hard to let go due to the international market share? I wouldn't. I mean, I think that's a fact. Like it's certainly a benefit, and the Lakers have benefited from international players forever. I mean, going back to Vlade Divac being like the first, one of the first European difference makers to come over. And, I know they were big in Yugoslavia and Serbia because of getting Divac. But more recently, of course, I mean, Kobe obviously being, speaking Spanish was a big draw for him. And I think a lot of, immigrants and people who come to LA saw themselves in Kobe and just like the Mamba mentality and the work ethic and all that. But of course, you had Pau and Sasha, and of course now more recently Luka, but Rui. And I think the Lakers have always been they're the biggest NBA brand by far. Like you can't compare anyone else to them in an international sense. But I think having certain players has certainly helped amplify that, and we've seen a rise in fandom in certain countries or pockets of the world. So I don't think he's hard to let go of due to that. Like I think for the right situation, I think the Lakers are legitimately high on Rui, and Rui's a good player. Like I think Rui is in a tough spot sometimes because what they need someone who's like a little bit more mobile and better defensively, and that's just not his game, and that's not his fault. Like it doesn't mean he's not a good player. It just means like at the end of the day, they kind of have two guys who play the same position as him defensively in Luka and LeBron. And like, there's just kind of a limitation there. So if anything, I don't think that falls on Rui. I just think it's more of a roster construction thing. So I think they're high on him. They're proud that they discovered or uncovered his talent that was kind of wasting in Washington, and I think they're always proud for their internal finds. But I think it's certainly a factor that I'm sure they consider to some extent. But I don't think they're like not trading Rui or potentially moving on from him at some point because of that. Again, it's a bonus to having him, but I think the main bonus is Rui's just a good player. Ali Latif 25, would you consider trading for Sabonis? I would not. And I know there's been some people who've wanted to LA to trade for Sabonis or whatever. So the thing for me is I come back to, and look, and I will admit, I try to look at everything through a playoff lens. And I think there are certainly some playoff questions with the current roster. I think the biggest one is can a Luka Austin backcourt coexist well enough defensively? I think it can, especially when looking at they made a conference finals with Jalen Brunson. They made a finals with Kyrie. And remember, Jalen Brunson was not New York Jalen Brunson yet. He was starting to show signs of it, but he took a huge leap going from Dallas to New York when he became the man over there. Kyrie, of course, is Kyrie, but I think Austin is no worse defense. I think he's better, and actually notably better than both guys. But at worst, Austin he's 6'5", Kyrie's 6'2", 6'3". Jalen Brunson's 6'1". He's a fire hydrant, but Jalen Brunson is getting called into every single action. Kyrie, actually, I think is an underrated defender, but still, just from a size perspective, I think it's kind of similar to a Gabe Vincent, and I think Gabe's on balance better than Kyrie, but even if you're pressuring well and you're playing good defense, if you're 6'2", you could just be shot over. And that's just the reality of playoff basketball and some of the defense limitations. I think we saw that, especially in the finals against Boston. Austin, at a minimum, he's 6'5". He's bigger than both guys. He is weighs more than both guys. And while he can be overpowered, I think he has a stronger foundation compared to those two guys defensively. But I think there are legitimate questions as to a Luka Austin backcourt or just tandem defensively and what the limitations are. And I do think you have to have three really good defenders around them. And I think the Lakers are better positioned to put three good defenders around them. But there are still some questions with Ayton and Smart that I don't quite know. So I say all this to say, adding in Sabonis, we've seen the Sabonis movie before. I mean, he's only made the playoffs in Sacramento once. There's just a real limitation there defensively. So he's a really interesting player where he's a top 40, 35-ish player. And by production, sometimes he's a top 20, 25. Going back a couple of years, he was in that top 20 conversation. But it's just so hard to build a good defense in, I think, a contending roster with Sabonis as your center. If you had a Chet Holmgren or a Victor Wembanyama or a Kristaps Porzingis from a couple years ago, and you're going with the double big look, and you had a floor spacing big, I think that's a little bit different. But I think Sabonis, with both the positions he occupies on the floor, and he can stretch it out a little bit, but he's more of an elbow post guy, and then the defensive limitations. I just think if we're talking about not knowing if Austin and Luka can fit together, if you throw in Sabonis, and now maybe you're including Austin in that, but Sabonis offensively, I think is an upgrade on Austin overall and is a better offensive player. But I think having a defensive limited center is almost a death knell in 2025. How many, look at the teams. If you go back to the conference finals, it was OKC with Chet and Hartenstein. It was Minnesota with Gobert. It was Indiana with Turner and Siakam and small ball looks. And then it was New York was kind of the exception, but they had so much with Cat, but Mitchell Robinson gave them some good minutes at the 5. And then also Bridges, OG Anunoby, Hartenstein, Miles McBride. I think they're a little bit of an exception. The East is also weaker. With the Lakers, if you have Sabonis as your center, I just think you're going nowhere, to be completely frank. Step back fam 24. What do you think the record is going to be the first 10 games for the Lakers? So I'm a little bit more conservative in terms of my predictions. I try to be not to go too overboard. So I said 7-3, but I'll say I think if I had to lean one way, like if I had to lean between 6-4 or 8-2, I would lean more toward 8-2. So I'm gonna split the difference and say 7-3, but I think 8-2 is more likely than 6-4. I think they have a pretty advantageous start to the season. The poster king, I mean, he said it here. We have enough white guys. I think, I could have just said that. Ryan Rich, Lakers giving Pat Riley a statue so he will lower his price for Wiggins in trade discussions. You know what? We'll see if it works. It is 2 weeks or so after the trade deadline, so that'll be at that point, decided. Poster King 3553, AR has to add some muscle. He has worn down last 2 years with bigger role. I agree, and that. I think my two biggest gripes with Austin are actually not everyone or a lot of people go to the defense, right? And I think that is a little overblown. Personally, I think it's like I think the Lakers got to be careful with the switching. I get why JJ, you have to be able to switch to some extent, and I get why JJ likes switching so much, but I just think now, especially adding Luka in the mix, like there are just some limitations that I think they're probably better as a coverage team defensively than a switching team, but I think Austin has to add some more muscle and like maintain his shape and conditioning better later into the season and more of like a legs thing because I think his jumper goes late in the season and everyone struggles with that to some extent, but I think Austin struggles with it more. And then the second thing is related to that with the jumper of two key differences with I keep referencing, and I'm sure some of you have heard me say this like 7 times now, with Kyrie and Jalen Brunson during Brunson the conference finals run, Kyrie the finals run, they both shot 40+% on catch and shoot threes. Austin needs to be a better catch and shoot player. And that is like the biggest thing I'm looking for with him this season. Of course, I'm going to be looking at like the conditioning and can he just fare better later into the season. But if he can't do that and he doesn't shoot, like it's been 2 first round series, so it's a very small sample size, but the playoffs are a small sample size. If he struggles again as a shooter, and also kind of loses his legs in the summer or not later in the season, the spring, then that to me changes the discussion in the direction the Lakers should go. But I agree with you. I think he needs to add some more muscle, and I don't even know if it's muscle per se. I think it's actually more of like the just wearing down at the end of the season, which I almost wonder if it could be more like when JJ said the championship shape statement, I thought of Austin too, and talking to some people like it of course Luka was the center of that, but I think Austin and his legs are something that can be better if we're being honest about that. And then I think the catch and shoot, like he needs to go. He shot really well his sophomore year during the conference finals run, but the last couple years in the playoffs he has not. And I think that's a big thing of like he almost 2/3 of his shots in that first round series against Minnesota were threes, and like he's going to be more of an off ball guy playing next to Luka, so he's got to make threes. And if he's not spacing the floor and he's not making threes, that to me that changes the calculus with him. Sky Falcon 5, non-defensive centers like Sabonis don't win. Center's the most important position on defense. Jokic is the exception. Yeah, I mean, Jokic basically has to be an all-time great offensive player to be the exception. It's really tough, and even him, I think Jokic is. I think he gets lumped in with like the Şengüns and the Sabonises, and I do think he's a tier above those guys. Like some of his rim protection numbers, and he's got really quick hands, and I think he moves his feet a little bit better. But obviously overall he's a net negative on the defensive end, and but he's the exception because he's so good offensively. Is it Jesus questions? Did you see Luka's first game for Slovenia? If so, what did you think of his defense? I saw a condensed, like clipped version of the game. I didn't watch the full game, but I watched the Luka possessions. I thought he looked much quicker overall on both sides of the ball, but I think that's the biggest benefit of, I think someone threw out, I think it was a Slovenian, either reporter or news outlet threw out like 31 pounds that he's lost. I haven't been able to confirm that number exactly, but if he's lost 31 pounds and the reports of him being around like 260 to 270 last year are true, and now he's closer to 230 to 240, that is a big difference. And I think it's actually going to help him more on the offensive end just with his ability to create separation, his ability to get downhill, and his ability as a finisher and as a playmaker. But I also think it's going to help him defensively with closing out, rotating. And, we've seen there's the graphic going around during the Minnesota series of the blow-by percentage and how the last couple of postseasons he's had a really high blow-by percentage, which is basically the percentage that you are blown by on closeouts and like that the guy gets by you. So, I mean, I never heard of that stat until people started using it for Luka. So I don't know how much of that's like people just try like, an anti-Luka thing or whatever. But like it makes sense. I didn't know that was something that was tracked. It's an interesting stat, but that's something that I think will be better with him. If he's in better shape and he's quicker and he's more spry, like I think him closing out and just being a better defender, like he's never going to be more than like an average defender. And I think even that's probably like, pushing it, but if he's slightly below, like I think he's a solid help defender. He's got good hands, good anticipation, good vision. I think a lot of his court vision offensively translates defensively, and he can be in the right spots. It's just clearly in isolation and when having to make multiple rotations and closeouts, and guys are attacking those closeouts on the weak side, like that's where some of his limitations are. So if he can shore up that, I think that goes a long way in helping the Lakers defense. G6388, what even are the expectations for Austin defensively? It's a good question. I don't think he's a stopper by any means, but I also think if people like to focus on, again, like I think in switching, there's a limitation clearly with him, and that's where they got to figure that out, because I think they got to do more scram switching, which is basically when Austin is switched on to someone else needs to rotate over and they need to switch that. So if, for example, Rui's out there and Austin is switched on to Julius Randle, Rui rotates over, someone helps for Rui, and you're kind of probably zoning up that part of your defense. And then Rui comes over, tags Austin, might tap him on the back or something, or at least like start like a double, and then Austin will rotate back, and then you kind of shift back. And that is a demanding style of defense, but I think it's, you see Golden State do that with Steph Curry, and like teams will, New York will do that with Jalen Brunson. Like teams will do that to hide certain guys defensively. Of you don't want, in those cases, really small guards, but in Austin's case, a slender, slight guard switched on to bigs or bigger forwards. Like that is a mismatch. So I think the Lakers, I think back on that Dallas game, what was it, back in December, where they let Dallas isolate Austin and pick on him 16 times and that was like some record at the time, at least for maybe the season, of like times the guy was isolated. And it was like, I think sometimes the Lakers just let their guys get picked on too much. And I think they have to be more proactive with dictating the terms of engagement defensively. But I think I can think of games against Steph, against Ja, against Shea, against De'Aaron Fox that Austin has defended well. I think on ball in the perimeter, I don't think is that big of an issue. He's not like getting crossed up or blown by all the time. I actually think he holds up well. I think the bigger issue is when there's a physical battle, and often with bigger guys, that is where he's susceptible to being overpowered, whether that's in the paint or on drives. Again, so I don't like him guarding up. I don't like him switched onto wings. I don't like him switched onto bigs. That is where I think there are real limitations, and you are more often than not going to lose that battle. We even saw it going back to like Team USA. Remember where there was I think it was the Lithuanian player who, it was like some big forward who kept picking on Austin. And like, yeah, if you put him on those guys, they're going to win that matchup. But if he's the secondary backcourt guy, I think he's fine. And I think anyone who thinks he can't do that just doesn't like Austin. And that's okay if you don't or don't see it. But like, I think it's being disingenuous if you don't admit that he's had good defensive stretches, especially earlier in his career. Like that's how Austin got on the floor. And he talked about that last season, was like, he was a good defender his rookie season. And again, he's always had some physical limitations, but like he's been able to pressure the ball and he's been able to stick with guys. I think the bigger issue is he just has some physical limitations that like if guys can pick on him and it's someone who's way more athletic than him or way stronger than him or way bigger than him or some combination of those three, that's where he's just he can't really do much and you might have to foul but I think the Lakers got to counter that better. Like you got to protect your guys defensively. I think the same thing goes for Luka. I think Luka got picked on a bunch in that Minnesota series and the Lakers could have done a better job of helping him out. So I think it's something that they're going to have. Like I think Gabe at times, I remember the Kevin Durant game where he was picking on Gabe. Like I think they got to do a better job helping their limited defenders. And that to me is a big thing going into next season. Just Brian's brain for 7. I hope Thiero really, or sorry, the name, the spelling always messes me up, but it's Thiero. It's not Thiero, it's Thiero. I hope Thiero really turns out to be a dog. That would be honestly a game changer for the Lakers this year. Like I think he's going to be a dog at some point, but typically it takes guys until the second year or third year to really contribute if you're not a first round, lottery pick or something, right? Sometimes guys will pop but if the Lakers somehow get Thiero to pop and he turns into a rotation player, like with the athleticism and physicality he has, that's the exact type of guy they need. Sky Falcon 5, who has a better shot to get into the rotation, Dalton or Thiero? I still think it's Dalton. And I know I've been a little down on Dalton. And I know a lot of fans are still very high on him, and I get it. I see the potential. I think dealing in reality, I think some people have overlooked some of his limitations a bit. But I still think Dalton, especially with the shoot, like going through the rotation exercise with Cranjis, one of the big things that we both, one of the big conclusions we came to was like, there's just not a lot of shooting in the rotation. Outside of the main guy, like of course, Luka, Austin, and LeBron are all above average shooters. Luka is a good shooter, especially on a very difficult shot selection. LeBron has been a guy, especially the last few years, who's hovered in that 37 to 40% range for the most part. Austin is an above average shooter, but he's fluctuated a bit, but typically is at least mid 30s, if not higher. And then Rui, of course, has been around 40% since he's gotten to the Lakers. But then you get to Ayton, who's not a shooter, Jackson Hayes, who's not a shooter, Maxi Kleba, who's used to be a shooter but has been regressing, Gabe, who has just not shot well in LA, Vando, who's not a shooter, and Marcus Smart, who has had one average shooting season in his career, 11-year career. So I think history suggests he will be a below average shooter. I just that all of a sudden you're just dealing with a dearth of shooting, and most of the guys who I just mentioned as good shooters are going to have the ball in their hands. So of course there's only one basketball. So if Luka has the ball, LeBron's off ball, Austin's off ball. So like there will be times where those guys are flanking as spacers and shooters, but like there will also be times where Austin's the primary guy or LeBron's the primary guy, and they're playing with bench units. And I think how the Lakers fill out the shooting will be interesting. So that's where I give Dalton, like they need defense too. So that's where if Thero's ahead of schedule, he could certainly find his way into, can he play like the Jordan Goodwin role? And like they're different skill sets, but like just kind of that spot in the rotation potentially. But I think for LA, like I think needing some shooting and a guy who could just like space the floor and get hot, I still see the value in Dalton. So I think it's relatively close, and you could argue that again. I think they need some shooting offensively, and they need certainly defense and athleticism defensively. But between the two, I think Dalton's probably closer to being a full-time rotation guy. But who knows? I mean, that's what training camp and the preseason are for. I think we'll have a better sense then. Sporadic 18, JJ should plan his defense to combat them picking on Luka Reaves. Lakers give up way too much with their whimsical switching. 100% agree. I think the passive switching is a mistake that I think it, like, I just think it did more harm than good. Dart Dan 3983, yo, why did I think this started at 8? I'm sorry. This was originally supposed to start at 12, but I just woke up today and like, I don't know if you guys can hear it in my voice, but I've been sick for 2 weeks, and that's why I've only had one episode over the past like week and a half. And I'm going to wrap soon here, but I posted on Twitter and on here that I was starting at 7, but I'm sorry you missed it, but I'm glad you made it now, and we'll go for a little bit longer. Jesus question's a bit pessimistic here, but with the front office's inability to surround these stars with talent over the last 5 years, do you think we could see fans turn against them at games like it can in the protests? No. Like I agree that I think I still don't know what the front office's basketball ethos is. If I tell you Golden State and their front office, if I tell you Miami and their front office, if I tell you Boston and their front office, if I tell you OKC and their front office, if I tell you San Antonio and the Popovich Duncan era, like that conjures images of certain types of players. And those teams didn't go 10 for 10 or even 8 for 10 on all their signings, all their trades, all their draft picks. But like there's a clear ethos of, if I say a Spurs player during the Popovich, Duncan, Parker, Ginobili era, like you think of, they had a bunch of role players who were high IQ, never really getting in trouble off the court. They weren't like doing media stuff. It was a lot of like team first. Like they were very high on character guys. I think OKC has created a version of that with their current group where it's all selfless, team first. I mean, these guys don't even drink. You see them winning the championship. They don't even know how to pop a champagne bottle. Like OKC is really prioritized character. You think about Miami and it's been like heat culture and you got to be in shape and you got to be tough and you got to be hard nosed. And like Miami has a certain ethos. With Golden State, it's playing with a sense of joy. And it is, of course, everything revolves around Steph and Draymond and previously Clay. But like their role players they're shooters. They are typically quick. You got to be able to switch and play small. And like Golden State has had their ethos. And I think Boston had their ethos of really prioritizing like two-way wings and versatility. And honestly, a lot of the ways that JJ wants to play was switching everything, taking a bunch of threes and leaning in analytics. And like it could go through like the Morey teams and stuff. Point being, there are certain teams and organizations and GMs and presidents that have a certain ethos that if I tell you that name, if I tell you that team, that GM, you think of those types of players. I don't know what the Lakers ethos is, because if you go through the last 5 years, or really starting with the LeBron AD first year, even the second year, the title defense, that team was much different. Like they still had some of the core guys with KCP, Caruso, Kuzma, but going from JaVale and Dwight to Trez and Marc Gasol, totally different. Going from Danny Granger and Avery Bradley to like Dennis Schroeder, totally different. And then from like the Russ year was a disaster and was like the expendables with all the old guys. And then they had the weird half year with like a weird roster. Then they remade it. But then even the last year and a half, it's like they haven't had a clear ethos of what they want to prioritize. And really there's no trends in like the types of guys they draft or the types of guys they sign. Really it's like big name former lottery picks or like kind of guys who bounced around a little bit. So I don't know what their basketball ethos is. I think JJ's trying to create a culture and a basketball ethos with what he's doing and how he's coaching and the types of guys that they're bringing in now. So maybe I think that should be the goal with the Luka era, is like to create a consistent and a sustainable and a clear basketball ethos and just a way that they want to operate, a way, like the types of guys that they want to prioritize and build around. Because I think there's just been so much roster turnover and just so many different types of styles. And it feels like every year we've had a different Lakers team and it's just different offense, different defense, different rotate. Like there just has not been a lot of continuity. So to say nothing of actual like basketball preferences and style. And so I can't, to your point, I can't tell you what that is. However, I don't see how you could revolt on this team when they have Luka, who just extended. You still have LeBron, you still have Austin. You nailed it this summer with Ayton, Smart, Laravia. I think JJ is a very promising young coach. Like I get some of the pessimism, but I don't think anyone should be protesting or too upset. Ryan Rich 2776. What do you think of Bronny's progress and how he did in Summer League? And what do you think of Adu? I've been very impressed with Bronny, and I still think that the big thing for him is improving on the defensive end. And I just think, especially on this team with this makeup, if we're putting, let's say Bronny somehow gets in the rotation as like the 10th guy, maybe even the 11th guy, in the offense, like he's become more of a scorer in the G League and with Summer League and stuff. But like in the offensive hierarchy, Luka, LeBron, Austin, Ayton, and Rui are always going to be ahead of him. And that's to say nothing of even like a Gabe Vincent or a Jake LaRavia, who I also think, at least at the NBA level, have shown more consistently than Bronny. And that's before even mentioning potentially Dalton, who, despite his summer league struggles, like I still think projects as a better offensive player than Bronny, at least currently. So like, is he a better offensive player than like Jackson Hayes and Jared Vanderbilt? Potentially, probably better scorer. But I think the things he's leaning into, like the scoring and the playmaking, only go so far on the current roster. And if he wants to be more like, I think it needs to be, he's a better defender than Gabe Vincent, and he comes into the game as that spark plug off the bench who's just, performing at a higher level than Gabe, but that has to come on the defensive end. So I think that's the next step for him, is like ramping up more on the defensive end. I think it's gotten better, but I think there's still like a couple notches to go up on that level. And then in terms of Adu, it stinks we didn't get to see him in Summer League. I would have loved that, but I really like his game. I think the shot and the spacing are going to be two big things, and it's tough to be a perimeter player in the modern NBA if you can't space the floor. Like, you have to be defending at an elite level. Now, he projects to be that, and he is a physical freak, and he's very gifted physically, but it's tough to play if you can't space the floor. Like, that's just a fact in 2025. Like, I think teams have started to lean more into two big lineups, so you can kind of get away with it maybe with one or two bigs. And he is kind of this hybrid where he's like a 3-4, and maybe his best position is the 4, which also plays into like Rui and Vando and LeBron and Luka. And I do think they have this over-indexing at the 4 spot. But I'm interested. Like, I would like to see him, of course, in training camp in the preseason. And I think if he can pop and be ahead of schedule offensively, I think the defense, the athleticism, the rebounding, the transition game, they're all going to be there. And he's a unique weapon that like could exceed, it's kind of like in football when you have like the quick backup running back who just can do certain things that maybe the starter or even like the backup can't do. Like, I think Adu could have that Devon Achane, like Keaton Mitchell, that's obviously two vastly different players, but like he could have that kind of quality of like, he just comes in and like just does stuff. And as simple as that sounds, like the Lakers kind of need guys who could just come in and do stuff. And I do think there's a potential role for him. I think it's just, he has to hit a certain level offensively that I'm not quite sure he can get to, at least as a rookie. But if he does, I think that does change the rotation. And I think it changes potentially the calculus of this team, because they're missing, they do not have a lot of athleticism. Most of their rotation players are below average athletes. And that's, to me, one of the big flaws with this team currently. At 998, people keep saying Luka will be the favorite getting regular season MVP. If Shea plays like last year, can you still see Luka MVP? Good question. I think there is voter fatigue always. So I tried, when I vote for awards, I voted twice. I try not to have voter fatigue, and I try to really just look at I think there's an element of like, if you are winning an award for multiple times, ideally you are doing something a little bit different or better, right? And you're not just maintaining the same level, unless like your level is so, like with a guy like LeBron, it was like he was so far ahead of everyone else. I kind of think Jokic has been at that level, but whatever. I think Steph, KD, like Kobe, like there's guys who have been at that level where they're just clearly better than everybody else, regardless of how different their numbers are. But I think that the biggest thing with Luka versus Shea, especially if Shea has another, I think Shea will probably have a similar year. Voter fatigue is a factor, but also I think the win totals here, because I think OKC is going to walk into 60 plus games. Chet missed basically half the year last year. Hartenstein missed 20 something games. Caruso was load managed for a lot of the season. They still won 68 games, and that's 3 of their top 7 guys. So if you're looking at that, like, this is a team that their floor is so high that I just don't see a world in which OKC doesn't win at least 60, if not 62, 63 games, even if they have some regression or injuries or whatever. That team is just so loaded that I think they're going to win 60 plus games. And for the Lakers, if they're a 5 or 6 seed, it's going to be tough for Luka to win MVP. If they're a top 4 seed, I think that opens up the door for Luka to win MVP. So I think also his numbers, like 2 years ago, he averaged 34, 9, and 10. Can he get back to, can he be 32, 8, and 9 or something like that in that range that's competitive with Shea? Then maybe. I think he's got like because the bar for Jokic to win MVP is so high because he's won multiple times. Because Shea's the reigning MVP, it's going to be a high bar. I like, if I was like betting, I would like the Luka bet the best. Right now he's third in MVP odds, but realistically, I think there's a reason why he's third. And like Jokic or Shea, if I had to bet my life on it, I'd probably lean Shea winning a second time and winning a couple of MVPs. But I think from an odds perspective and like Luka bouncing back to where he was a couple years ago, I do see the real case for Luka to win MVP. No username 1269. My biggest question mark for one player is how Marcus Smart's going to look. I have confidence in Ayton and Luka are going to be playing the best they've ever played. I think I'm with you. I think if I have like my biggest question mark for anybody is probably Marcus Smart. I think the big thing that I talked about with Cranjis for those who listened to the rotation breakdown episode was just in watching the film and looking at his matchup data over the last couple of years, he was used far more on big wings and even like forwards and like power forward size guys than he was on small guards. And I still think that's an issue for the Lakers overall with their rotation is like we kind of disagreed on Marcus's capabilities there. We also disagreed on Vando's capabilities there because I actually think Vando could do some of that stuff. He was more skeptical that Vando could. But between Smart, Gabe, and Vando, I almost put all three, like those are the three biggest wild cards for me because Gabe has not been the same player since coming to LA that he was in Miami. And the more time passes, the more that Miami year looks like an outlier just based on the years that preceded it, the years that have been after. I know he's dealt with injuries, but like that's just part of it. You gotta, if you're always injured, like that's a factor in like your value and your performance and all that. And then Vando like has just, we've seen flashes from him, but he's not been the same player since 2023. And he's had 2 injury riddled seasons and had the double foot surgery last offseason. So I think those 3 guys are probably the guys to me that changed the Lakers ceiling the most, because to your point, I think we know what we're getting from Luka. Like he was already amazing last year, but by his standards, he can be even better. And I think he will be better. I think Ayton's going to have a huge year being spoon-fed by Luka, Austin, and LeBron. And contract year, like he's at a bit of a career crossroads right now. He needs a big year. Rui, I think, is pretty consistent, and we'll see if he gets moved to the bench and how he handles that. But like I think we know what to expect with Rui. I think Laravia is going to pop a bit as a bench guy, and I like him. So you just kind of go down the list and you start getting into the Marcus Smart, Gabe Vincent, Vando. And like Vando and Gabe Vincent have not lived up to their contracts the last 2 years. And Marcus Smart, I think they're like, if he plays the way he did the last 2 years, he will not, it's fine for the current contract, but like he will not live up to the expectations that the Lakers have, that he has, that the fan base has. So Marcus Smart needs to play his best basketball since the 2022-23 season. And Vando and Gabe, I think, both also have to play. Like, so we're counting on their 3 best defender or rotation defenders to be guys who have not performed well over the past 2 years in the aggregate, whether due to injuries or whatever, especially not up to their contracts. So like, I do think Marcus is the guy who projects to have the biggest role, whether he's a starter or a 6-man. So I put him as the highest question mark. But the more I kind of think through this question and just kind of my feelings on the rotation, I think Marcus, Gabe, and Vando to me are the 3 big, like I think they need at least 2 of those 3 guys to hit. And I think it probably has to be Marcus as one of the guys. And then they need Gabe or Vando to hit and have a better, be healthier and better than they've been the last 2 seasons. If they get that, then I think they have you add in LeBron and Ayton and Hayes or Kleba, whoever's the backup. And like, I think they can Frankenstein their way to being a good enough defense, or at least like passable. But if those guys don't hit, and I think there are legitimate injury, age, and just, performance related questions with those guys that like if only one of them hits, if it's like Gabe hits and Marcus and Vando don't hit, like I just don't think their defense is going to be good enough. So those are the questions for me is like, but Marcus offensively, I think we kind of know what to expect. He is what he is. The shot selection's an issue. The turnovers are an issue, but isn't a solid playmaker. What's funny is that when I was talking about the offensive options earlier, I didn't even mention with Bronny. I didn't even mention Marcus. Marcus is gonna get some shots up, so I should have mentioned Marcus. But I was like trying to go through the roster, and I knew I was forgetting someone. Yeah, I'm with you. I think Marcus is the biggest question mark. A music love. Okay. I was messing up your name earlier, but it's a music lover 4L. Do you have any insight, read the meaning, if any of the near simultaneous IG posts from AD and LeBron? I do not. I will say like AD's had some concerning or emotional IG posts, IG stories lately. I don't know what it means, but I hope everything's okay. And yeah. Did I say... I said Danny Granger. I meant Danny Green for those. I'm catching up on the chat here. Meant Danny, not Danny Granger. Danny Granger is a Pacers great, not to be confused with Danny Green. Zach Wan, trade Austin Rui for Keon, Keegan, Monk, and a 29 first. This one's more interesting to me because I view it as like Rui versus Keegan. I would rather be in the Keegan business. I think they're pretty close, but Keegan is a bit younger, and I think he's better defensively, or at least a better wing defender specifically compared to Rui. Then it's more of Keon, Monk, and a 29 first for Austin. So you're getting a lot of Austin's offensive production with Monk. I do think Austin's a better player and a better defender than Monk, but you're also like you're getting an additional roster spot. And I love betting against Sacramento's team and getting a future first from Sacramento. So this one's interesting, I will say. Again, I think they'll continue to reiterate, like, my understanding is that the Lakers' bar for trading Austin is very, very high. And I think ideally they want to package him plus something for like not necessarily an all-star, but like a very high-level starter. I don't know if any of these Sacramento guys quite fit that criteria, but you do get the 29 first, which is really interesting. So this is among the fake trades. This one's interesting. BC says Smart will return to 2022 form. If he does, that changes things a lot. Chucko Thunder 387 says the issue with Smart is his usage. He can't do it on 30 plus minutes anymore. And that's why when we did the rotation talk, I think I projected him at like 26 minutes. And I think they got to be careful with Smart's minutes. I might have even been 24 or 26, but like they got to be careful. I think you probably got to load manage him a little bit, and it just is what it is. He's at a different, he's 31. He's dealt with injuries the last couple of years, and the shrewd move is to be careful with his minutes and role. Is it Ashik? Probably just butchered it 3 times. I'm sorry. 14 back-to-backs is crazy. We got 3 in a row in January. Yeah, I mean, so I will say, I mentioned this at the top, that the Lakers are actually tied for 13th most back. So 12 teams have more back-to-backs than them. I think there's 5 teams with 16 back-to-backs and 7 teams with 15. So 14 is an increase from last season. Last season, they only had 13. But so it is like worse, but on a scale, they are relatively in the middle of the pack with back-to-backs. So I think the schedule is actually a little bit, at least the front part of the schedule is a little bit easier than previous seasons. Like the Lakers have had some brutal starts to the season over the last few years. Now, to your point, January is an absolute bloodbath. January and February are just brutal months. Like, I think they're even tougher than last year. Remember last year's like late February through late March. That was like Denver twice, Milwaukee twice, I think the Clippers twice, Minnesota, Dallas, Phoenix. And we thought at the time Phoenix was going to be decent at least. I think it's tougher than that stretch, to be completely honest. Diego Cardona, your poll had me stressed, Jovan. A lot of these players played before I started watching basketball, and trying to compare them to the young guns I grew up with was tough. So what Diego is referencing is I'm going to be doing later in the summer the top 25 Lakers of the past 25 years. I think it's a nice whole number, 25. It's been 25 years since the millennium. So looking at just judging guys based on, I guess, the 99-2000 season and beyond, ranking the top 25 Lakers of the past 25 years. So I posted a poll in the community tab on YouTube. And if you guys want to vote in that, it's basically you go through, I think you could vote 100 times. So you don't have to vote 100 times, but you could vote as many times as you want, up to 100, where it gives you two options. I think right now I have it to 30 players. So I originally started with 60, then people voted. I whittled it down to like 40, then I whittled it down to 30. So it gives you two players, player A, player B, among the 30, and you just say who's the better player. And that creates an internal ranking, which I'm going to be using for the basis of the top 25. I'll probably make a couple tweaks because I think there's a couple guys that are a little bit too low in relation to some other guys that I'll talk about when I do the episode. And then I think I'm going to get on with my intern team, which I did the draft show with back, draft live show back in late June. And we're going to do a draft, and there's going to be 4 of us, and we're going to draft the players into like a 6-person team. And then you guys can vote on who had the best team. Caleb Bergeson 3271. I know AD didn't play in his return to LA last year. When he plays in LA this year, how do you think he will feel, and how will the fans react? I'm sure there'll be some level of emotion for AD. He did get a standing ovation when he returned in that first game in February, but obviously was on the bench and not on the court. So I assume the Lakers will have an extensive video tribute for him. And he's a guy who I think is going to have his jersey in the rafters one day. And I think he deserves it. And won a championship, I think was the 1B for large stretches of that season, and that title run, had the postseason of his career, that bubble run. And, I think he deserves to be, like if we're just basing like it off performance, I think he's better than a lot, like purely based on performance. Like the most interesting one for me is like, with the ranking was like Powell versus AD, because I think AD's like unequivocally a better player than Powell, but obviously Powell was part of 3 finals runs, 2 title teams. He was attached to Kobe. I think he means more to Laker fans. So I get why Laker fans would like, I get why he would be voted ahead of AD, but if we're just talking like pure, like peak or even like 3-year peak, like AD was a much better defender than Powell. Like AD was defensive player of the year level, all defense level, arguably best player in the world or defender in the world for multiple years. And then also like an all NBA, all-star level offensive guy, which of course Powell was as well. But that like, I think AD is really high in the Lakers all-time conversation in terms of his performance. I just think obviously it was, undone by injuries, the Westbrook trade, and just him only being a Laker for 5.5 years. But like for the 5.5 years, if you look at his resume, like of course he's not on the Magic, Kobe, West, Baylor, Kareem, like the Lakers, their opening list is very long, but kind of like, I think he compares favorably to a lot of like the tier 2 guys, let's say, that I don't think like for a lot of fans at first glance, they would put AD pretty low on that list. But I think if you actually look at like his production and performance, he's higher than some guys you would think. But like the AD versus Powell one's very interesting because again, I think I totally get like Powell had a better Lakers career and they won 2 titles, 3 finals. But if you look at his production versus AD, especially factoring in how I think we could debate the offensive end, though I would still lean AD on the offensive end, but like certainly the defensive end, it clearly goes to AD. That's just like an interesting one for me. But I think the fans will be he should be celebrated. Antonio says Powell was a much better offensive weapon in those 3 trips to the finals. He fell off in the Powell was a more, I would say, skilled offensive player. He was a better passer, better shooter. Although AD did have the 3-point shooting and like the jump shooting in the 2020 run, of course, was at a much higher level than any of his preceding playoff runs. But I mean, just in terms of raw point, like, and I know raw points isn't everything, but like AD was a higher usage, like more consistent offensive weapon than Powell. I know the game is a little bit different back 2008 to 2012 versus like now, but like just from a pure numbers perspective, AD clears Powell. It's just Powell was a bigger part of more championships, bigger part of more deep playoff runs. And I think there's a nostalgia with Powell that like Powell is like the greatest human ever, maybe. Like he's like in that conversation. I've been fortunate to meet him a few times, and like I also AD is a great human, and like AD is an awesome dude. So we're really splitting hairs here. I just thought that was like the most interesting one for me, because I think it's a clear. I mean, it's gonna be Kobe, it's gonna be Shaq. Like LeBron's gonna be 3, and then right now it's Powell 4, 85, and I kind of expected that top 5, but I just thought AD versus Powell was a very interesting like bellwether, and it's been pretty close, but I think Powell's going to win it. For sure. Sky Falcon says AD the better player, but Powell helping us beat the Celtics is a bigger deal. 100%. And that's where Lakers, it's championships, and championships is what matters. Ryan Rich, do you like the Lakers' new hire Lakers hire for the new strength and conditioning coach? I do. He previously worked with Luka. I think that this is already like the first thing we're seeing with new ownership is investing in an award-winning performance staff and strength and conditioning coach. So I think we're already starting to see the new fingerprints with new ownership. And yeah, I mean, hopefully this lasts longer, because they've had so much turnover with the strength and conditioning and like performance department. Like it feels like it's been either every year or every couple of years if you look at the hiring cycle, and hopefully there'll be some more continuity and stability with it. But I am a fan from the little, I haven't met him yet, but the little I know, I'm a fan. Glenn asked, do you think Bronny cracks rotation this year on a consistent basis? I don't, just because if we go through the rotation, like, so for now, we'll say Ayton, LeBron, Smart, Austin, Luka, 5 locks. Rui's a lock. I think Laravia's a lock. I think Gabe and Vando are like, I think that's the top 9 in some order. Then I think we get into the next phase where it's Jackson, Maxey, Dalton, Thero, and Bronny. And that's the rest of the roster. Like, on paper, he's arguably the worst of those players. Can he outperform Thero? Can he outperform Maxey? Maybe. Can he outperform? Like, I guess, can he outperform Gabe would be the real one of like that. That's probably the guy he has to jump. And for as infuriating as Gabe's shot selection can be and the inconsistency, like, Gabe is a professional. He earned a certain level clearly of, remember, he was the one guy JJ was about to sub in the second half of game 4 was Gabe. He got called to the scorer's table, and then the play never stopped, and then he eventually got pulled back to the bench. So like fair or not, I think Gabe is firmly ahead of Bronny, and I think it would take a lot for Bronny to jump him. So I think if we're looking at, I think there's a top 9, and then the 10th is probably Jackson or Maxey as the backup 5. And then there's a battle for like the 11th spot, I guess, technically. Probably not going with 2 backup centers. So it's probably whoever wins the backup center spot's the 10th guy. And then there's an 11th man competition between Dalton, Thero, and Bronny. I just think if you look at their skill sets, I think Dalton has a clear need he addresses with the bench scoring and the shooting. I think Thero has a clear need he suggests with perimeter defense and rebounding and athleticism and like energy. Bronny, again, I just think by virtue of like his strengths recently have been shot creation and playmaking, and you don't need those things as much on a team with Luka, LeBron, Austin, Marcus Smart, and then even guys like Ayton, Rui, and Gabe who are going to be involved in the offense. So like, I just think Bronny, like, unless he really takes a giant step defensively, which I'm not saying is impossible, but like, I just don't foresee currently, I don't see the need for a 6'2" guard in the rotation. Like, if anything, Dalton at 6'5", 6'6", Thero at 6'7", 6'8", like they need more size on the perimeter overall. All right, I'm going to wrap here. I told my wife I was only going to go an hour, and of course, I went 40 minutes extra, but I'm losing my voice. I appreciate you guys. So, quick schedule note, I'm going to New York tomorrow for 6 days. So, not going to be doing anything starting tomorrow through Wednesday. I will likely be back on Thursday, Friday at a minimum for sure, but likely Thursday recording a mailbag. So I'm going to be doing a personal mailbag where I asked you guys a couple weeks ago to send non-Lakers, non-NBA questions, and I'll just kind of a get to know me Q&A. So I'll be doing that, and then probably going live on Friday. So be on the lookout for that for next week. But I am going to take a 6-day break, my second mini trip of the summer, and hopefully rest a little bit and get right. But as a reminder, we're doing a Buha's Block survey. I would love to hear from you guys. It's like 3 or 4 pages of just asking you about the show and what, positives, negatives, what you associate with the show, and just different questions. So for those who participate and fill it out, we will be doing a private stream that will only be for the people who do the survey, and will not be something that's published. So, you'll get some more intimate access with me. But that'll do it for today's stream. Thank you all so much for watching and listening. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button. About 40% of you watch and are not subscribed. So please make sure you hit that subscribe button if you have not done so yet. Turn on channel notifications, like and comment. Comment your mailbag questions if you have any, and also comment your game that you're looking forward to the most this season. Then for those on audio platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, leave a 5-star review. Shout out to the Late Night Gang. I appreciate you guys. Gonna rest. Got a 7 a.m. flight to New York. Looking forward to it. Love New York. But got to try and get some sleep in the meantime. But happy schedule day. It was I think overall interesting schedule for the Lakers, but I think it could have been much worse. Like I think last year's schedule was tougher. So I think it's a positive. But appreciate you all, and we'll talk to you all very soon.